Արեցես սիրելի արկելի նկաներ։ Հայկական ինքնության շուրջ ընտան
Good morning, dear and distinguished guests. Welcome to this conference organized with the Hrant Foundation and the Hamazkayin Foundation, and it's a first in all regards, and it's something novel to us as Hamazkayin, because in Yerevan, in cooperation with the State University, Hamazkayin has been studying the Armenian diaspora literature. This conference is in three languages. You can present in English, Armenian, or Turkish. It was a problem for me to select in what language I would deliver my remarks. I thought that I would reach most of the audience without intermediaries by speaking in English, because it's the lingua franca of our day, but I've quickly decided on Armenian, or Western Armenian rather. Being an Armenian and knowing how to speak Armenian and having the opportunity to speak Armenian, whereas you have those speaking Armenian, speaking any other language in Istanbul is not something to be considered. Istanbul is where the Western Armenian was born. The rural Armenian dialects and ancient Armenian have been gathered here and shaped and blended into the modern language that is spoken today. It has been enriched and modernized with the effects of foreign languages and has created literary works, and it has transformed into Western Armenian. Today, Western Armenian, well, language is not only a basic identity of a nation, it's also something that constructs an identity in itself. Is Armenian in danger? Then is Armenian identity in danger for all Armenians across the world? How and to what extent? Inevitably, alienation is a threat to living together. Is it possible to discuss one single Armenian identity? What is the level of consensus among Armenian communities? What is the Armenian identity? There are plenty of questions, and I'm sure that this conference will help answer at least some of those. The identity issue is mostly dwelled into with wrong questions. Who is an Armenian? Or even more ridiculously, what is an Armenian? Those who think that these types of questions are constructive think that it is possible to identify someone's identity with these questions. So someone being an Armenian or not, it's like identifying someone's religion. This is almost like a religious identity, personal conscience. And much like religion, it's about personal convictions and beliefs. No other person or institution can decide on someone else's identity. And moreover, by refusing the objective and official recognition of that identity, can withhold a right to citizenship. So, by only refusing a legal detail that defines identity, it is certain that someone who feels Armenian is Armenian. But by looking into, it is also possible to define the Armenian identity by looking into the characteristics of people who claim themselves Armenian. Identity is a very complex issue. It has countless parameters. These are not of equal value, but they're of different degrees. Every characteristics has a specific measure in defining an identity. Language, religion, true and imaginary putative homeland, cultural values, level of education and quality of education, the family traditions passed on from generation to generation are data that affect the sturdiness of identity, especially for communities that have existed for thousands of years. Peoples like the Armenians who have dispersed all over the world, it's very difficult to define their identity because the Armenians in Armenia, the diaspora, so there are very colorful communities constituting Armenians, also those in Turkey. American Armenians, European Armenians, they're different. The Armenians in Eurasian countries are different from each other. And they are in turn different from Middle Eastern Armenians, and they're all different from Armenians living in their homeland. This diversity is unavailable in the Armenian reality. The tides of political security and safety challenge Armenians to seeking new identities. Half a century ago, the Armenian communities of the Middle East had created an active dynamic environment which defined Armenian identity, but today they all face existential problems. Is it possible to discuss one single Armenian identity under these conditions? Superficially, we can say no, but in the end, I think the answer will be affirmative, because all the parameters that define this identity, their monochronic existence creates the society, and it's not a must for all peoples and all communities. It is sufficient that only some characteristics are the same. The common ground in all Armenian communities ties them together, even if the ties are weak. Besides laws regulating the identity problem, the Armenian people have another common ground besides the genocide. There is a principle of self-defense here, and it keeps said community clinging to life. The same community, namely Armenians, were deported during the First World War, and they survived. And then, due to they're more resilient than other Armenians who later on left their homeland due to economic reasons. The sturdy appearance of the diaspora has caught attention many times, especially in international platforms where Armenian issues are examined. Those people who are thought to have drifted away from their Armenian identity have taken to the field, even if for a time, and they've approached their roots again. The geographical conditions is not suitable for the components of Armenian identity to communicate with each other easily, but modern communication tools have facilitated that. Planes, telephones, internet have led to cultural exchange and preserving common values that define identity, and also creating new ones that served these new inventions have served to this end. Especially now, the Armenian world has a geographical focal point, the Republic of Armenia. The model of specifying societal elements is ready there, and around this core it will shape and take form naturally. This process moves along naturally, even though it encompasses very few of the Armenians worldwide. Conferences such as this are initiatives in the same orientation, especially if they're being held in Istanbul. The Armenians living in Turkey have created their own separate poles, a community that belongs neither to the homeland nor to the diaspora, according to Hrant Dink. And the reason for that is because they've had the lowest contact with other Armenians, even with the diaspora, for 75 years. Today, this relationship has become natural, and it has served for the gradual approach of Armenian identity, sub-identity. We've had mutual visits, education and cultural visits, so we've created strong friendships, and the cooperation, idea of cooperation was underlined. I'm sure that this activity will not be the last of its kind. This conference is politically very encouraging. It's not taking place under very politically encouraging conditions, because for the past 40 years within this region, there's been there's a civil war going on for 15 years and war between two countries for 8 years. In Syria, the only war, the civil war has exceeded 5 years, and many other countries are not in stable conditions. Coming together for such a conference under these conditions, I suppose, is due to a specific element of Armenian culture, and I wish the conference all the best.